Welcome back to Nothing Happens for a Reason. I am so grateful to be here with you for Season 3. This is a space where we honor the truth of grief without the pressure to fix it or find a hidden meaning. We believe in dismantling the platitudes and sitting with the messy, unfiltered reality of loss. Whether you've been with us since the beginning or you're finding us for the first time today, I'm glad you found your way here. Let's get into today's episode. This is Nothing Happens for a Reason. Hi, Kim.
Hi.
How are you doing?
I'm doing so well. I'm super happy to be here with you today.
I'm so happy to have you here. Well, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Kim, and I live in Seattle, and I'm a writer and intuitive guide helping people through their in-between seasons.
Can you explain a little bit more about, one, what it means to be an intuitive guide, and what does it mean of being in between seasons?
Sure. So I call myself an intuitive guide just because that's kind of the label that felt like it fit me the most, meaning I really use my intuition to kind of help my clients as we work together, and I bring in all kinds of modalities that I've learned over the years. So my goal is really to let my intuition lead and to help my clients and help others kind of connect to their own inner wisdom and let that be their guide.
So what are some of the modalities you use?
Yeah, so I think the one that I lead with most is called inner voice training, and that's really just being able to kind of converse and connect to your intuition, to your inner wisdom, whatever you want to call it. It's just that innate wisdom that you have. I'm also really into tarot. I do a lot of tarot readings with clients, and I think that tarot cards are just such a great way to really self-reflect and to kind of, when you're feeling stuck or you're not sure about if it's your inner wisdom or your mind, it just gives you that clarity and that space to kind of understand your own wisdom coming through.
I love that. I actually, in preparation for our episode, as I was sitting here about 20 minutes before, I took out my tarot deck, which I love to use. I don't know them very well. And I've my sister who died, I have her deck as well next to mine. I've not actually really touched hers, but it was really important that when she died, I had those. But the card, I pulled one before our episode. I pulled the 3 of Wands. Can you tell me what that means for right now?
Yeah, that's so interesting. What I love about tarot is really you don't have to really understand or memorize the meanings of the cards. It's really open to your own interpretation. Wands are the suit of fire, so it's a lot of that kind of fire energy and that momentum. And yeah, I think for me, what's coming through is just being able to kind of take what's happening and transform it and make it into something new.
Yeah, I resonate with it, especially with, being in the middle of the recording of season 3 and meeting you for the first time and really leaning into this enterprise that I've been spending a lot of time and effort into. So yeah, very cool.
Yeah, I really think that that kind of idea of taking what life has given us and using it as a source of transformation is what I'm hoping to share as well. And that's kind of the journey that I've been on, and how kind of my work as someone who's helping people through in between seasons that came from years of being in various in-between seasons myself. The most recent one being my in-between season of grief and grieving the loss of my dad. That one, I just feel the in-between season is a great space of it feels like you're no longer the person you once were, but you're not quite ready to maybe step into the next version that's waiting for you. And you find yourself in this kind of liminal space, in the in between where you're grieving, you're letting go, you're completing a chapter, and then you're also learning how to welcome in the new and like who you're becoming. And it often to me feels like there are days where your life just feels like an itchy sweater. It's really uncomfortable. And through that discomfort, transformation comes through.
How long ago did your dad die?
He died a little over a year ago.
A little over a year ago. So you've recently hit the 1 year.
Yeah, the 1 year was at the beginning of February, and then
Mm.
his birthday is at the end of March. So it's a lot at the top of the year to kind of process.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if you've experienced this or have heard of this in the kind of grieving community, but there's a lot of us who feels like we have what we call like hell months and
Mhm.
things that just kind of happen all at one time. And I know for me, like I have two chunks of time throughout my year, and the day my mom died, my birthday's soon after that, and then my
Yeah.
sister's death day is like not too long after that. Like that is a horrible time of year in the end of summer,
Yeah.
fall. And then around now, my mom's birthday is actually this coming Monday,
Mhm.
and then like Mother's Day, and they're just like
Yeah.
all together, and it's like too much sometimes.
It's so much, and I don't know about you, but I find like sometimes the anticipation of what's coming is almost more challenging than like existing through those days.
Yeah, no, I deeply relate with that. I remember when my mom died and leading up to the first year, and I've been seeing my grief therapist for I started seeing her like 8 months before my mom died,
Mhm.
and she told me that. I remember her saying the anticipation of the first year or other things usually feel worse than the day itself,
Yeah.
and it was true. Like my body, what happens like somatically within me, even at
Mhm.
this point, and I've talked about this on other episodes, but the like sometimes, the year goes by so quickly that certain dates sneak up on me.
Yeah.
And I just will be like, why am I on edge? Why do I feel irritable? Why am I like angry? Why am I crying at the drop of the hat? And then I'm like, oh, looking at the
Yeah.
calendar, next week is fill in the blank. And it's like my body knows before I do. And again, the leading up feels worse for me often.
I think there's definitely like the beginning of the year is really challenging for me. And I think this particular year, it was more just leading up to not only like the anniversary of my dad's passing, but it was the end of the year of firsts. And so
Yeah.
I had kind of this self imposed timeline of like what it meant to move on after a year of kind of really, really intense grief. And I didn't know what that would look like. And I think in that anticipation, I was hoping that on the anniversary of his passing, I would just wake up and maybe feel differently or be ready to move on. And that's not really how grief works in my experience.
No, mine neither. And I know for me, with the first year after my mom died, and then again with my sister, I actually really had some like deep pain and just like anxiety about after passing the first death day, being not able to say like in the last 12 months, my
Yeah.
mom, my sister was part of everything that happened in the last 12 months. There was so many things that I was able to look back prior to the first year of like, okay, like they were still here for this event, still here for that birthday. And then
Hmm.
once the year hit, it was like, now the last 12 months, they have not been part of any of it.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
that was kind of like a mind fuck for me and the like, grief math of it all.
For sure. Oh my gosh, the grief math. It's probably math we shouldn't be doing. But it is so challenging and I think like Yeah, when I talk about year of firsts, I really think about going through the entire calendar year, without the person you've lost. And then
Mm.
after that it turns into like, oh, well, it was like, this was how it felt last year and now it's kind of comparing, or I feel like
Mm.
I also was afraid that I could no longer use my grief as a reason kind of why I was having a hard time navigating being out in the world.
Yeah.
And I think like for in my grief, it was a little bit, yes, it was like the primary grief was losing my dad, but with losing my dad, I was losing so many other things at the same time. So going back to January of 2025, I was living in Seattle. I was renting a townhouse and I just randomly got a letter in the mail that was like, "We're selling your townhouse, like you have to move." And so, right in the few weeks before my dad passed, I was actually like looking for places and kind of using his guidance to maybe look at buying a house. And with his support, I ended up putting an offer in, and I was actually in escrow when my dad passed away. My parents live up in Alaska. So, after he passed, I spent some time up there. And then when I came home, I moved to a completely new home. So, I like was grieving the loss of this home that meant so much to me. And, I was grieving this person who meant so much to me. And then I also was just given all of these new responsibilities. I'm the primary person caring for my dad's estate and doing all of that work. And so now I felt like, okay, like I'm the head of the family and I have this whole new identity. So it
Yep.
was like my whole world turned upside down. And I felt like that first year of grief was like, okay, grieve and get acclimated to like this new life, this new timeline that you've been plopped into.
Shell shock is
Yeah.
usually how I describe it, like,
Mhm.
it's just walking around in a daze and a fog while trying to
Yeah.
acclimate, like you're saying, to whatever's going
Yeah.
on.
And I just felt like I didn't have any comforts of my past life.
Mm.
The place I ended up moving into is in Seattle. It's in the same neighborhood, but it's about a mile away from my old house. And so all of my little daily routines that anchored me were different. My favorite coffee shop was a 20-minute walk instead of a 5-minute walk and little things like that, and just waking up and being confused about where I'm at because I'm not used to my house yet. Those little things were really destabilizing in a time when I already felt like I was free falling.
Hmm. Yeah, free falling's another really accurate way to
Yeah.
describe a period like that. Did you know that your dad was he in a dying process? Did you know he was going to die, or was it a shock?
Yeah, so it was a little bit of both.
Okay.
About a year prior, my dad had been diagnosed with kidney disease and he was going through the process of starting dialysis. And the November before he passed, my sister and I had taken a trip up just to spend time with him. And he was like such a pre planning, like type A kind of person. So we ended up going through, like, in case something happens to me, these are all the things you need to know, but it was like a in the future, 3, 4, 5 years in the future. And then in February of 2025, he just was having like kind of a bad weekend. He couldn't get comfortable and it happened really quickly. It went from like, "Oh, I'll be fine. I'm just not feeling well," to, "Oh, I think we're going to go to the hospital," to my mom saying, "You need to get on a plane right now." So it was both anticipated and also a shock.
Were you able to make it to Alaska before he died?
No. So my sister and I got on the flight and we were expecting to go just spend however much time in a hospital, but he had actually passed before we ever left Seattle.
Hmm.
But our family and my mom made the choice to not tell us until we landed, which I think was the right one. I think it would have been really hard to get on the plane and to sit on the flight knowing what was on the other side. And so I really do trust in that decision that she made for us, but it was the longest and hardest flight that I've ever been on.
Yeah, because you were still probably in the mindset of like, are we going to make it?
Yeah, exactly. And
Mhm.
just like, what are we walking into?
Yeah.
And I had made plans with my childhood best friend. She was going to pick us up from the airport and take us to the hospital. And it was really eerie. Like while we were on the flight, everyone just kind of got quiet and we weren't receiving any texts. And it's easy to kind of attribute it to like not having Wi-Fi on the plane, or like my sister and I weren't sure what was going on. But then when we landed, we kind of learned that it was intentional.
Does your sister live in Seattle with
My sister lives in Seattle as well.
Oh, okay. Has that been a supportive dynamic for you through this?
Yeah, I think that we're 5 years apart. She's younger than me. And I think that it's really changed our relationship. In some ways, we're closer. And in other ways, it feels like there's more distance because a lot of the responsibilities are falling to me. And she kind of was able to go back to just kind of her life as it was. Like she didn't have a lot of the like logistical changes that I experienced. And so I would say like, yeah, we still are very close, but our relationship is a little bit different.
Yeah. Yeah, as grief does
Yeah.
to relationships in so many different ways. So, with the conversations around like end of life
Mhm.
planning that you all did, you were aware that you were the I don't know if power of attorney is the right word or
Yeah, so really what happened was my dad was working for like the last few years to put everything into a trust, and I knew
Mhm.
that. And for my entire life he was just a very straightforward and direct person. And so he'd been communicating these kinds of things to me like since I was a teenager, because my sister and I are 5 years apart. Like I remember turning 18 and my dad saying like, "Hey, I updated the will today. If your mom and I randomly pass, you're in charge of your sister now versus her going to like an extended relative." So these
Wow.
conversations were very common, and I kind of always knew what the landscape would be, and he made it
Mm.
very clear. So I knew kind of what my role would be. I didn't fully understand the responsibilities I was taking on and how they would feel. I think like even though my mom is still, alive and like healthy in a lot of ways, like I see myself as kind of more like the matriarch of the family, because I've taken on all of these responsibilities and I'm kind of the driving force of like, how do we make the decisions to, you know, keep the trust going? And my dad also was a business owner. So we have this business now. And so I'm really the one in the driver's seat and in the leadership role.
And what was the reason that it's not on your mom?
My dad always, like, was the one who was working. She was a stay-at-home mom, as it's pretty common for that generation, and I think my dad just knew that she didn't really have the capacity. She didn't really want to learn how to run a business or do the paperwork. She just wants to just live her life and not have a lot of worries. And so I think my dad knew that I was the best person for the job, and he really wanted to give my mom that support that she needed.
That's a lot on you though.
It is a lot on me, and my dad is also an oldest child, and I think he just kind of saw
Mm.
that as oldest children take care of their family, they take care of their parents, and that's just, like, part of what you're born into, and I didn't really have a choice, and yet, like, it all makes sense. And, my family is so important to me that I wanted it to be this way as well, and as difficult as it is, as much work as it is, like, I'm also really glad that it's this way.
Hmm. Yeah. So like the both and it's
Yeah,
hard, it's exhausting, and sounds like you have accepted the role and you understand the role and this is the way that you would like it to be.
exactly.
Any moments of like different emotions in there with it? Ever like
Yeah.
resentment or I'm just
Yeah,
projecting, but
100%. I think, like, that's one of the ways where I feel like my relationship has changed with my sister is, like, sometimes I feel that resentment building, or I'm just like, "Why can't you, like, step up a little bit?" And then I just have to remember that, I did have a choice. I could have said no,
Mm,
and I don't have to do this and I am doing it, and to not
Mhm.
let that resentment kind of build. But there are definitely days where it's super frustrating and I don't want to do it and I just want like to be taken care of. And I think that's
Yeah.
also part of the grief. Our family is like pretty close, but my dad was always the one that I looked up to. He was a mentor for me. He really guided me as I was building my first business. And so losing the one person that I really trusted for advice and kind of all of these life matters and business matters makes this a lot more difficult because I don't really have anyone to turn to, because the person that I would turn to is the one who created this in the first place and is the one who's gone.
Yeah, it's another one of those, like, secondary losses that you're
Yeah.
talking about within this, like, the ripple and the I don't know if irony is the right word, but,
Mhm.
like, you're in the position because of him, and he's the person that, like, you want to support you through
Exactly.
this. It's a lot, though. Do you feel like being in this I mean, you used the word, like, matriarch
Mhm.
role, and you have a lot of logistical things that you've had to manage in the last year. How has it impacted, if you think it does, like, your grieving process?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I feel like it definitely the grief makes some of this stuff harder. I know like for the first couple of months, I would like open the bills that were coming to me. I would, have to have a call with the attorney and then just completely like I would just fall apart after because all of these little tasks are the things that also reminded me of my dad, and both in the way that, like, I'm doing it because he's gone, but also because that's just how he showed love, was taking care of little things for us. Yeah, it was almost like by doing all of that, that helped me, like, process my grief because I
Hmm.
was able to just, like I couldn't help but kind of unravel and cry and really just move through it, but it also made it really difficult.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's, like, some I don't know if it's a weird word, but uh, gratitude that you felt like it was able to help you in that, because I know that talking with other people who've like been put in these positions of decision making and legal cleanup, whatever we want to call it,
Yeah.
has like prevented grief because you're just like
Mm.
having to make decisions and be in this decision making role and
Yeah.
have your shit together kind of, and not have moments of feeling like you can fall apart. And so it sounds like you've been able to balance both though, which is really incredible.
Yeah, it's definitely those moments where you're having to move through it and, like, keep it all together, and then I noticed that, like, then it would just after I would just completely fall apart from being kind of tired and drained from the experience. Also, just being from a place like Alaska, where it is a smaller, tight-knit community, it was really cool to be able to hear about who my dad was from the people I was, like, meeting with. The attorney, who was working on my dad's estate is also, like, my mom's neighbor. He lives across the street. He knew my dad really well. The financial advisors that my dad kind of put in place, like, they worked with my dad for years, and so there were those moments of also just feeling really connected to him through other people's perspectives and being able to kind
Mm,
of hear what he was like from these other people. Yeah.
that's really special. It sounds like your dad really was active in making sure everything was in place, which
Yes.
is, from my experience, fairly abnormal. A friend of mine who's an estate planning attorney, we just the other weekend did like a will dinner to
Mhm.
talk about the importance of like end of life planning, because we just like don't do a good job talking about it in our
Yeah.
society. And just even like reading articles about, like the boomer generation, they are more likely to not have like wills and have their like estate stuff
Yeah.
figured out because they don't want to talk about it. And then the chaos that ensues after the fact when they don't do that. And so again, it sounds like abnormal, but it sounds like your dad
Yeah.
really wanted you guys to make sure things were just like taken care of on the other end.
Mhm. Yeah, I definitely think, like, it was his love language to
Mm,
kind of make sure that those aspects of life, both when he was living and then he was planning for when he wouldn't be here, that he wanted to really show he cared through that. And he spent a lot
Mm.
of time and energy making sure everything was in place. So I'm really grateful for that. I think it would have been infinitely more difficult without him having done that work.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And so I know you mentioned both in what you wrote to me and then
hmm
also at the beginning of this episode that you're kind of managing like your mom's finances now. So what does that look like?
Yeah, so I really am just helping her kind of make sure that she can continue to live the
Good.
same kind of life. And so I just make sure that, I'm looking at her investments and that there's cash flow and then thinking about what's going to happen to my dad's business and just helping her kind of in that way because Alaska's pretty behind in everything. It's a very analog place. And so my mom, I don't even think now she even knows what an ATM card is. It was
Wow.
like you have a credit card, you have cash, you write checks, like the end. Just making sure that she can like navigate her life in a similar fashion and figuring out what that looks like and like paying, I set up auto pay for her credit card and kind of look through everything to make sure that nothing is fraudulent just to help her out so she doesn't have to worry about it and look at it because she really doesn't want to.
Again, it sounds like almost a full-time job for you.
It
Like,
is. In the beginning, it definitely took up all of my time, and I wasn't
yeah.
really able to do anything else for the first few months. Now I've kind of figured out my system, but it does require a lot of me, and I think it's more than the actual time it takes. It's the heaviness of like carrying that responsibility of knowing that like I am fully accountable for my choices and they impact more than just me. And I
Mm.
think that's what it really means to kind of be in a leadership position in family in this instance.
And I can also imagine you had to learn a ton. Like, even the way you were talking a few moments ago, I'm like, did you know all those things prior to being put in this position? And maybe you did, but
Gosh,
not
I
not what
knew,
not what
yeah.
an ATM card was. I know.
Yeah.
I know that part.
Yeah, not to this level. I
Mm.
had business experience. I had started, grown, and closed a business before. I've done things in that sphere of working with attorneys. Like I understood how my dad's business was kind of formed and what that looked like. But there was a lot of learning and relying on kind of these advisors that my dad put in place as well.
Okay. Yeah. Like you said, there was a lot of trusted people
Yes, yeah,
in your
he
circle.
really had built those relationships with people so that I had kind of a reference point.
So I am very, very curious because your company you have with, being an intuitive and a coach and all
Mhm.
of that, you said 5 years you've been doing that?
Yeah, 5-ish years I've been kind of coaching and guiding.
Okay. Before meeting you without knowing your timeline, I part of me like assumed that part of the loss of your dad was really leaning into this work. Obviously
Yeah.
they're different, they're separate. So I'm curious
Mhm.
about how has your perspective on like healing work that you've been doing for
Yeah.
5 years changed with the loss of your dad?
Yeah, so I think what really transformed for me was that after his passing and kind of going on my grief journey is what kind of led me to focusing on this in between space. I think those first few years, I was really focused on kind of learning and training and like figuring out the modalities. And then kind of going through my first year of grief, I kind of figured out like, okay, this is. This is what I want to focus on. And I think this is like the sweet spot for me. And I think it was also going through, I really needed to understand the grief journey and go through it on my own to really understand that in between space on a deeper level.
Where do you feel like you are currently in that journey?
Yeah, I really feel like especially in the last kind of few weeks, I
Mhm.
do feel like I've really gotten a lot of out of this particular in between space, and I'm ready to start to kind of shift into my next version, my next phase, and like move forward and really build like a life that I love.
Thinking about like where you're at right now,
Mhm.
also taking another moment of like looking backwards a little bit, even just from the year, because something that you had said that really resonated with me in your interest form you filled
Mhm.
out was about grieving the person you used to be. And I know we've like touched
Yeah.
on you like the environmental changes and leaving your house and moving and not having like the physical comfort, but are there any other things that you want to touch on about like what did you mean by that about grieving who you used to be?
Yeah. So to get a little bit more into like the woo woo stuff, I definitely felt like my dad's passing, I mean, it impacted me greatly. It changed who I am, but almost like a jump in timelines. Like there was such a distinct end and beginning for me that I felt like I had to not only grieve my dad, but I just was no longer the person I was before he passed. I immediately changed. I was in a new house. I had new responsibilities. I was forever going to be this person who didn't have their father anymore. And so I think something that's really important that I've done in kind of past in between seasons is just really taking time to like grieve the person I was and say, thank you so much for, bringing me up to this point and you were valuable in these ways. And now I'm like going on this journey to like figure out who I am now.
It's making me think about I remember I saw this post, maybe 4 years ago. Time is so strange. I'm
Yeah.
like, "Is that even right?" Anyway, some time ago, and it was the first post I'd seen in a long time that, like, really hit me, and it was talking about how I'm grieving not just the person I used to be, but grieving the version of myself that I never get to be now because this loss happened,
Yeah.
and I just thought that was so poignant for me because,
Mhm.
like, that's true. Like, I have had moments of grieving old Claire and also moments of grieving who I never got to become
Yeah.
because of my
100%.
losses.
Yeah, and I think it's also grieving the hopes and the dreams that that version of you had because when you go through something so significant as loss, it really changes what you want out of life.
Yeah. I know you talked about the house changing and those things, like, externally and for me, and I think I'm hearing you say this too, but it's, like, on a molecular level for me, like,
Yeah.
cosmically changing, deeply, deeply changing. I've never used the term, like, the in-between space, but
Yeah.
I had some, like, dark in-between spaces
Yeah.
where, like, I was just a shell of myself, like,
Mhm.
I was untethered, a word that my therapist she's very into, like, words, which I always
Mhm.
appreciate, and a word I used early on after my mom died was unrooted,
Yeah.
and she, at the end of session, was like, "You used this term a few different times," and she was like, "Usually people say uprooted, but you said unrooted," and I was like, I didn't even intentionally do that, but I was like, "That's
Mhm.
how I feel." Like, I'm not
Yeah.
uprooted, like, my roots have been cut off, like, I
Mhm.
don't have roots anymore,
Yeah.
and, ugh, it's just a wild ride, like, I don't
It
know
really
how else to
is.
describe it.
It is. It's pretty wild. I think too, like being a sensitive person and someone who really looks for depth in life, I wanted to face my grief head on. And I don't want to say I took it as a challenge, but I really let it in.
Hmm.
And I think because of that, it made that season of life really intense and really difficult. And I think, yeah, that's where I kind of felt more of a disconnect from my family because I don't think that they made that choice, which is like totally valid. right?
Yeah.
But I think it was like that, just diving into the deep end and kind of seeing, trying to swim to the bottom of the ocean metaphorically. It got dark and it got intense. And also, like, I think that it really forced me to come to terms with certain parts of who I am. I think it was like I kind of shifted into this next version, but it was also I became even more myself. And I think that is part of what I'm bringing to the work I'm doing now. If we had done this interview last year, I probably wouldn't have called myself an intuitive guide. I would have said that I do somatic coaching and let my inner wisdom lead. And I think that claiming of being an intuitive guide is such an important one because through the loss of my dad, I've really kind of woken up and been able to claim some of these intuitive gifts that I have and the connection that I have to my own wisdom and the universe and, my guides, whatever you want to call it. And I think
Mhm.
that was one of the cooler parts about my grief journey was really getting to pick up on a lot of those signs that came through. I've had some like crazy intuitive experiences in the last year that maybe I wouldn't have been ready for before, but I was just so desperate to maintain a connection with my dad that I think it really opened me up in ways that I could have not been open before.
Hmm. Have you read the book Signs?
I haven't read it cover to cover, but I kind of
Okay.
know what it's about.
Okay, because it's written by a medium,
Yeah.
and her whole idea is, like, we all can be
Mhm.
intuitive and see signs, like, you don't need professionals
Yeah.
to do it. Yeah, it was a really powerful book for me
Mhm.
to read many years ago, and so I'm curious, like, what's been the most powerful sign that you've seen in the last year?
Yeah. So I think one thing that I've done since my dad has passed away is I continue to have a relationship with him and I talk to him. And one of the things that happened when I was driving to the airport when he was still alive, my sister and I met at the airport separately just because of logistically where we live in Seattle. And I was in my car. I was obviously so upset and just. I was driving to the airport and I just out loud was talking to my dad and I was like, hey, I love you so much. And if you're really suffering, I want you to know that, like, you don't have to wait for me. I want you to move on if it's your time. And, like, I'll honor whatever decision you make. And I just want you to know I don't want you to suffer so that I can say goodbye. And then
Hmm.
I found out that he had passed like pretty shortly after that conversation. And I didn't know it until after because
Yeah.
of what we talked about earlier. But that open dialogue is something that I've continued. And so at different points in my grief, I've been really open and just asked for signs like, hey, dad, I just miss you so much. Please send me signs and let me know that they're signs from you. And so I've been able to kind of like collect those and it's been super fun. And there are days when I get like so annoyed. One of the signs is seeing like a little float plane fly kind of overhead because my dad was kind of in the airline industry and that's his business. And so planes have always been a connection point. And there are still days when I see a float plane and I'm annoyed and I'm like, I just wish I could call my dad instead of having like a plane fly overhead. But it's
Yeah.
also really beautiful to know, to be able to have these touch points of like, okay, when I see this, it reminds me of my dad. It's his way of like communicating with me. And it's been a way to really maintain that connection.
Yeah, I love that you're talking about this, and for me, and this is not something I've shared very often,
Mhm.
but so after reading the book Signs, the whole idea behind it is, like, pick a sign, right,
Yeah.
that represents the person that died, but, like, it has to be kinda, like, unique and abnormal, right? Like, it
Mhm.
can't be, like, a butterfly. I hate saying that
Yeah.
'cause I know a lot of people have butterflies, but, like, for me, especially, I'm such a skeptic.
Mhm.
I'm like, it cannot be something common because I will never believe it. I'll be like, "I
Yeah.
see those all the time." Like, "Okay, sure, whatever." So, for my sister, I picked, those, like, little craft googly eyes?
Mhm.
Her and her husband always loved, like, putting them on random shit in their apartment, and it was always hilarious. So I picked googly eyes, which is not something I see very often.
Yeah.
And New Year's Eve 2024, usually on New Year's Eve, like, go out to dinner or something with friends, my partner, and I have this beautiful necklace I have of my mom's that I don't wear very often, but I always wear on New Year's Eve because I'm like, I want to carry her into the new year with me. And for my sister, I was like, the coat I was gonna wear, like, didn't go with my outfit, and then I was like, this doesn't go either, and I was telling my partner, I was like, I was kind of panicking. I don't have anything of hers that, like, I'm wearing out tonight that I'm bringing
Yeah.
to the new year. I was a little spun out about it, and then I was like, "It's fine, whatever. I don't need to do that." And we go to dinner, this nice dinner with some friends, and then afterwards, we're all kinda tired. We're in our mid-30s, and we're like, we don't need to make it to midnight. But collectively as a group, we're like, "Let's go to this, like, dive bar just near our house and then probably go home before it's even midnight." And we've never been to this dive bar before, none of us had been. We walk in, we are the only ones in there besides the bartender, and I'm talking to the bartender, and I look behind her, and on, like, the dishwasher at the bar, there is 2 giant googly eyes.
Oh my
And
gosh.
I, like, kinda panicked, spun out, I was, like, started to cry, and this bartender was like, "What's going on?" So I, like, start
Yeah.
telling her this whole this whole saga, and as I'm telling it to her, she's like, "This is so funny," because she's like, "We're known as the googly eye bar." She was like, "There's, like, over 30 sets of googly eyes hidden throughout this bar." And I was like, I didn't know this place existed. I didn't know it was a googly eye bar. And so that was like one of the most special experiences I think I've ever had. I've gotten into a very good routine on my mom's death day. Like, I know what I do every year. I feel good about it. And I've had some anxiety with my sisters of like, I haven't found the thing that I want to do
Mhm.
every year, that I don't feel pressure of what am I going to do this year. This last year, we just went up to that bar, hadn't been back since New Year's Eve. And the bartender was there again. And my partner was
Yeah.
like, "Do you want to tell her?" And I started telling her. She's like, "Oh my gosh, I've been thinking about you for the last year. I couldn't believe your story. I've told other people your story." So I'm like, this is what I'm going to do every year. Come to this bar because it's the thing that I feel connected to her with because it's the googly eye bar, which is so random. It's been really special. And for me, I don't have the connection on a very regular basis. It's
Yeah.
something that's like an ongoing journey for me. And like those moments, I just can't even, I just can't even explain to people like what that moment felt like for me. I try
Yeah.
to, but it's hard if people, like, don't get it.
Oh my gosh. I love that story so much and like how funny and fun to like be in a bar full of googly eyes. That is such a great sign
Such a good sign.
and like such a good story. And that's just such a great example of how we are able to still kind of connect to the ones that we've lost.
Mhm. And you've already been touching on it and, the sign with your dad and the
Hmm.
planes, but I think something I was curious about as we're kind of almost done.
Yeah.
Are there any other ways that you're trying to stay connected to
Gosh.
your dad? And part two, I guess, would be like, as an intuitive coach, what do you recommend to people who maybe are going through something similar?
Yeah, so there are so many ways that I connect to my dad. It's the float planes. I also have this lamp. It's like a gold kind of like cactus lamp, but it has multiple bulbs and one will flicker sometimes. And it's flickered on and off to the point where I'm like, this isn't just the light bulb is old because it will go
Mhm.
for weeks without flickering. And then the other day, it just was going off. And I'm like, oh, he's just here. So that's another one. And then the biggest way I still connect to him is through his love of football. He was a big Seattle Seahawks fan. And so I also feel like it was just so magical that they won the Super Bowl this year. And that was
Mm.
our first season without him, and there were a lot of signs in that happened throughout the season, but I was never really, like, into sports, and I really only started following them because I wanted to feel closer to my dad, and then now it's something that helps me feel more connected to the place I live, but then it's just
Mm.
so fun to be able to continue that legacy of being a fan because he's a fan or he was a fan and watch the games and feel that kind of that connectedness.
That's amazing. My dad is the reason you won.
Exactly. No, it really felt like that. I was like,
Yeah.
okay. And the Super Bowl was 4 days after the date my dad
Oh.
passed. So it was very much, it felt like this gift of like, I don't want you to be sad. Here's a distraction and something to celebrate instead of just wallowing in your own stuff.
Mhm.
So it felt like a
Love
really
that.
wonderful gift from him. And to answer the second part of your question, I would say, like, really for anyone who's going through an in between season, anyone who's going through loss, I just want you to know that you know what's best for you. You have all of the wisdom inside of you, and you just have to like open yourself up and be, open to tuning into that. But you already have everything that you need. And really, my goal as a guide is really to just help you tap into that. And anyone you work with, their goal should be to kind of help you tap into the wisdom that you already have.
That's a really beautiful affirmation. It's a good reminder because I think with grief and loss and traumas and
Yeah,
all the things, we often can lose like trust in ourselves or just
definitely.
feel so lost that
Yeah.
the idea that we have internal resources to get us through it can feel like a lie sometimes, but
Yeah.
it's true.
And like it's okay to feel lost. Like it's part of the
Mhm.
process. And I think if I could gift someone anything, it would be to release them from any judgment of where they're at on their journey and who they are,
Mhm.
because everything that you're going through is so important. And
Yeah.
that's why you're going through it. And it's okay to be lost. It's okay to not know.
Mhm.
It's just all part of it.
And I think with that too, and my guess is you would support this perspective, but like sometimes the in between space, we can be there for like a very long time, and that's
Yes.
okay too, right? Like,
Yeah. There's no set time on being in the in-between space, and there's no limit to how much, how many in-between spaces you visit, because we're always growing and changing and
yeah.
evolving, and part of that is letting go before you know for certain what's coming next. And that's what the
Mhm.
in-between space is all about.
As you were just saying that, I was like, "Oh, it's kind of existential." I'm like, "Are we always in an in between
Yeah,
space?"
kind of.
Like we just leave one in between space to the next
Mhm.
one.
Yeah.
I can resonate with that. Well, this has just been really, really lovely. Is there anything else that you want to share with our listeners before we wrap up?
I mean, there's so much I could share, but I feel like I've
Yeah.
I've shared enough of my story. And yeah, if you're curious to learn more about me, you can
I'll put your
always,
information in
yeah,
the show
go ahead,
notes.
put my information in the notes, and just know that I'm supporting everyone's in between space, and just know that like you're not alone.
That is the most important and my favorite message
Hmm.
from all of this. So, well, I just really appreciate you so much, Kim. Thanks for being here. Thanks for sharing about your company, for sharing about your dad and just your journey through your own in between space. I just deeply value it. So, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me and for, creating the space to openly talk about grief and loss. I think it's so important. So I really appreciate the work you're doing, and it was
Mm,
just so fun to be able to come and chat with you today.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you for joining me for another episode. If this conversation helped you feel less alone, there are a few ways to stay connected into this community. To stay updated on everything we're doing, you can subscribe to our newsletter or follow us on Instagram. If you're feeling the digital fatigue and looking for support that you can actually hold in your hands, please join the waitlist for the Echo Registry. Our Pen Pal project is for anyone tired of connecting through screens and looking for the tactile connection of writing to another grieving human. And of course, you can grab the free ebook, Let Me Know If You Need Anything, and other things to stop saying, right on the website. And lastly, if you haven't yet, please take a second to rate and review the show on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. It's a small act that makes a massive difference in helping other grievers find this space. Take care of yourself, and I'll be back next week with a brand new episode.